Okay, the next item of business is a debate on motion 17981 in the name of Murdo Fraser on recognising the economic contribution of Scotland's defence sector. I invite members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons, and I invite Murdo Fraser to speak to and move the motion 17981 up to 7 minutes. Mr Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Now, we are continually being invited by the Deputy First Minister to be positive about the Scottish economy and to celebrate success stories. Indeed, we just heard that in the debate from our colleague, the Finance Secretary. Now, I regard it as one of my purposes in life to try and make the Deputy First Minister happy. So that's why this afternoon we are going to do just as she wants and talk about the success and the strength of the Scottish economy, and in particular our vital defence sector. And I just hope that she and her SNP colleagues will be as enthusiastic as we are about that vital industry for Scotland. Now, Presiding Officer, Scotland's defence sector provides a considerable contribution to our economy. As of 2023-24, the Ministry of Defence, the UK Ministry of Defence, spends almost £2.1 billion per year in Scotland and more per head of population in Scotland than the rest of the UK. But we don't just make military equipment here in Scotland for the UK. We export, and we export very successfully. So the total contribution of the aerospace, defence and security industry to Scotland is estimated at £3.2 billion in 2022. And that sector employs 35,000 people, including 1,500 apprentices. And right across Scotland, we see companies providing high-quality, well-paid jobs in the STEM sector. BAE Systems building frigates on the Clyde for the Royal Navy and directly employing 2,700 people. Babcock at Rosyth and Fastlane supporting more than 3,000 jobs. And this is something of an irony, Presiding Officer, that we have world-leading shipbuilding on the Clyde and at Rosyth, building ships for the Royal Navy, when this SNP government cannot even supply 2 ferries from its nationalised shipyard at Port Glasgow. And, Presiding Officer, we have Leonardo, of course known to people in Edinburgh as Ferranti over many, many years, building world-leading avionics and radar systems for Lockheed Martin, amongst others. We have Thales employing nearly 800 people across 2 sites in Glasgow and Rosyth. And in my own region, in Glenrothes, we have Raytheon building the Javelin anti-tank missiles being deployed right now so effectively by our brave Ukrainian allies, taking out the Russian tanks, illegally invading their country, and that we should be proud of, Presiding Officer. So we should be celebrating these successes, but also recognising the opportunities for the future. Because every Western government faced with the situation in Ukraine, faced with instability in the Middle East, and an increasingly isolationist US administration, is devoting more resources to military spending. Last week's spending review saw the UK Chancellor promise that defence spending would rise from 2.3% of GDP to 2.6% by 2027. If delivered, this will equate to an £11 billion uplift in spending, providing real opportunities for Scotland, not least in the upgrading of the nuclear submarine fleet based at Fastlane. And there are massive opportunities for us to grow our exports to nations across the world who are similarly increasing their defence spending, giving us the opportunity to earn more wealth for this country and create more jobs. So against that backdrop, Presiding Officer, we might expect that this Scottish Government, this Government that claims it stands up for Scotland, that this Government would be looking to support the industry to seize those opportunities in full, to create more jobs and apprenticeships. Instead, what we see is negativity and downright hostility. Now, one of the sector leaders, Rolls-Royce, planned to establish a specialist submarine welding facility on the Clyde, an £11 million investment to deliver a world-leading facility to support the construction and maintenance of the submarine fleet. It is a project that had been in development for years, would have reduced costs, cut carbon emissions and created high-value jobs. Just the sort of project we should be welcoming and supporting. And it was a project that depended upon a critical £2.5 million grant from Scottish Enterprise. And the SNP decided that grant could not be given because of their policy in not funding munitions. Shame on them, Presiding Officer. Because those jobs and that investment... Yes, I'll give way. Yes.
Daniel Johnson.
I think he's absolutely right. Does it not also stand in contrast with the attacks we know are happening in the North Sea to our communication infrastructure? And is it not, therefore, absolutely critical that the UK Government has stepped in to provide that £2.5 million funding?
Murdo Fraser.
Yes, I'm saying, Mr Johnson, I do welcome the fact that the UK Government stepped in, because that jobs and that investment, those jobs and that investment would have gone elsewhere. Steve Carlier, President of Submarines at Rolls-Royce, was very clear. This project cannot continue, he said, and the facility will not now be built and resourced in Scotland. And if it is the case the UK Government have stepped in, that is good news, but no thanks to this SNP Government. But of course, this was a project not involving weapon systems, not involving munitions, but simply to build submarines. So the approach we see from the SNP is both naive and immature. And nor does it make any logical sense, because we know the SNP policy is for Scotland to become independent. In that case, presumably, we would need armed forces. Those armed forces would need to be supplied with weaponry and equipment. Are the SNP really saying in that event they want all that to be imported rather than be manufactured here with the jobs going elsewhere? None of that makes any sense. Presiding Officer, what we see from the SNP is the politics of the student union, not that of a grown-up government that continually tells us it is supportive of the UK economy and of Scottish jobs. And that is why the SNP needs to think again on its short-sighted and destructive policy. Presiding Officer, Scotland needs a grown-up government, not one run by wannabe student politicians playing silly political games at the cost of real jobs and real wages. If the SNP cannot provide that leadership, Presiding Officer, they should step aside for the Scottish Conservatives who will. And I have pleasure in moving the motion in my name.
Thank you. I now call on Kate Forbes to speak to and move Amendment 17981.3. Cabinet Secretary, up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, I welcome the opportunity to speak on this motion. I'm going to try and cover quite a lot of ground in a limited space of time. But let me begin by stating plainly, Scotland's defence sector is of strategic importance to our economy, our communities and our shared security, and that is uppermost in our minds these days. The sector supports over 14,000 jobs. It contributes £3.3 billion annually to our economy, and it plays a critical role in areas like naval shipbuilding, aerospace and advanced technologies such as quantum and AI. The innovation generated within these industries is vital, not only for defence but for Scotland's wider industrial base. And that's why the Scottish Government, through our enterprise agencies, has provided more than £90 million in support to companies in the aerospace, defence, marine and space sectors since 2006. In recent years alone, we've supported major R&D projects in Rosyth, helped secure hundreds of skilled jobs through training grants and enabled diversification into civilian and green technologies. The Government stands behind the contribution that the defence sector makes to our economy and our national security. We also hold principled positions on how limited, devolved public money is used. We've worked constructively with companies like BAE Systems, firms with deep roots in Scotland and major contributions to make. Our clear and long-standing policy is that scarce devolved public funds should not be used to directly support the manufacture of munitions. We're targeting Scotland's public support. If you'll appreciate, I think my time's just been cut again, and I do want to cover quite a lot of space. We're targeting Scotland's public support towards innovation, training and economic diversification. Sorry.
Point of order, Jackie Bailey.
Could you give an indication of whether the Cabinet Secretary's time has indeed been cut again?
Confirmed that the Cabinet Secretary's time has not been cut, but it is still up to 5 minutes. I can give you the time back for that point of order.
My apologies to Jackie Bailey. I had been anticipating slightly longer, so I'm going to try and compress my comments. Unfortunately, I now have even less time to do so. For example, we have helped Leonardo to develop civilian radar and sensing technologies. We've supported Raytheon in expanding into commercial aerospace, and we've backed Walker Precision in its aerospace and medical technologies. And we're not just investing in businesses, we are investing in people, especially our young people. Scotland's defence sector, like many others, depends on a skilled workforce, which is why the Government continues to make significant investments in STEM education and training. Last year alone, we invested over £1.74 million in programmes that support the delivery of high-quality STEM learning in schools. We're supporting the future workforce through apprenticeships, backing around 25,500 new modern apprenticeships in 25-26 and continuing to support over 38,000 apprentices already in training, many of whom are in STEM fields critical to Scotland's industrial future, including defence. Over 80% of apprentices in STEM start their training at higher levels, ensuring that we develop the advanced skills needed in high-tech sectors, including those supporting aerospace, marine engineering and advanced manufacturing. And we fund the Young STEM Leader programme, which has engaged over 20,000 young people across every local authority in Scotland, and the STEM Nation Award programme, which has supported more than 8,800 teachers and nearly 120,000 pupils in recognising and building excellence in STEM teaching. And so we're embedding STEM into the heart of our education system and also supporting our current economic sectors. That is future-proofing our economy for decades to come. We're investing up to £2 million to develop engineering skills in the Glasgow City region, designed by the Clyde Maritime Cluster in partnership with Skills Development Scotland, of whom a key player is BAE Systems. And just as we invest in the skills and technologies of the future, we must also ensure that our investment decisions reflect the kind of future we want to build, one grounded in integrity and respect for human rights. That is why the Government signed up to the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and our enterprise agencies operate a robust due diligence process to assess companies' human rights records before funding is approved. That is why we voted for the Labour amendment that committed Scottish Enterprise to reviewing their human rights due diligence checks, and we plan to update Parliament before recess. Defence is a reserved matter under the Scotland Act, where UK Government funding is provided directly for munitions manufacturing. That is their prerogative. And it's a matter that the opposition are quick to remind us of in relation to how we spend our own budget. Our approach recognises that defence is hugely important. Scotland will continue to play a key role in supporting our allies, including Ukraine. Our support will focus on creating high-skilled, sustainable jobs and supporting innovation across the defence sector. The defence sector is vital to our economy, and it will remain so. We will continue to invest in defence-related innovation, skills and infrastructure to build a defence economy that is fit for the future, productive and proud. Thank you, and I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. I now call on Daniel Johnson to speak to and move Amendment 17981.1. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Johnson.
I move the amendment in my name. I welcome the statement that the Deputy First Minister made at the beginning of her contribution, underlining the importance of the defence sector. And it's not the first time she's made it in the Chamber, but the statements both she and the First Minister have made in recent months, let's be plain, are a change in position. And I think pretending that there is otherwise is frankly just not being straightforward. And the reason I say that is because I fear the SNP and some of the distinctions that they draw in the motion and the amendment that they have put forward today mean that they are still making some of those same mistakes. Because I think the distinction between munitions and other types of defence spending, I think, is a false one. I think it is also incorrect at a time of acute and heightened global and geopolitical risk to say that we should be divesting and diversifying from defence industries and expenditure. I think both of these points are wrong, and let me explain why. In Ukraine, since the start of the Ukraine conflict, or the most recent phase of it in some ways I should say, we've seen 950,000 Russians wounded or dead, just on the Russian side, according to the most accurate figures we have available to us. In response to that threat, the UK has afforded £12.8 billion of support. That has included tanks, air defence, including the development of the Grave Hawk system in conjunction with Denmark. We have provided long-range missiles. We've provided 30,000 drones, as well as training 51,000 Ukrainian service people. The point is this: that support has not just been systems, it's not just been tanks or equipment, it has included munitions. In fact, it's depleted our stocks. So support of Ukraine and presumably defence of this country will require the manufacturing of munitions to take place. And so to make that distinction, I think, is to make a very false and in fact dangerous distinction. Very happy to, but I need to be brief, Mr. Mann.
Edward Mountain, briefly.
I'll keep it very brief. I just want to quote Patrick Harvey. Don't do that often. Scotland is in solidarity with Ukraine and is outraged to those that would abandon it to the aggressor. Surely by not giving them arms, we're doing exactly that.
Daniel Johnson.
That's it. But I also think that we are being, we are not taking our own defence seriously by not considering what we need to do in terms of restocking our munitions. But also, I think it's also highlighted by the fact that, treating this submarine welding facility as, again, a munitions project is false. Clearly, a submarine is not a munition. Look, and it's not just Ukraine, it's the rest of the world. We only have to look at the developments in the South China Sea, with China increasingly testing internationally recognised boundaries. And more recently, the situation in Iran is one of grave concern, all of which I think require us to reflect about our own defences and our defence requirements. And it's not just in terms of traditional and orthodox military threats. Cyber. In the last 2 years, the UK has received 90,000 cyber attacks from foreign actors, almost 90 of which have been on national significance, which is why we have seen the UK Government bring forward the Strategic Defence Review with a commitment to 2.7% increase. And it's why I think the defence industry in Scotland needs our support and our investment across every area that we can, because this is not something that we want to split neatly between reserved and devolved areas. And in fact, that's explicit within the Strategic Defence Review. The whole society approach, but critically the mobilisation of our industrial base, will require devolved levers to be pulled. And just briefly on the Green Amendment and to the point around human rights checks, these things are not incompatible. If we want to increase our defence spending, if we want to support our allies, we need to enhance our human rights checks, because if we are doing that, it is critical we understand where our spending is going, where our arms are going to and how they are being used. So those things aren't incompatible, but unfortunately we cannot support the Green Amendment nor the SNP amendment, because far from diversifying from defence, we need to invest in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. I now call on Lorna Slater to speak to Move Amendment 17981.2. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Slater.
Presiding Officer, I move the amendment in my name. Per the discussion in the previous debate, the Scottish Greens believe in progressive taxation as a way to pool our collective resources and invest in the things that matter to all of us. An important principle of modern democracy is that voters should be able to see how their governments are spending money. There should be transparency and accountability. We know that at least £8 million of Scottish enterprise grants have been awarded to companies involved in arms dealing and manufacture since 2019. We know that a number of these businesses have directly supplied weapons and military equipment to Israel during its assault on Gaza. Genocide, war crimes, more than 60,000 people killed. I would hope that we would all agree that our government should not be spending money on these things. While I recognise that the Scottish Government doesn't provide grants for the manufacture of munitions, I don't think that there is a moral difference between supplying money to build bombs versus money to build a bomb factory or a training facility to train bomb makers. The principal point is very simple. If a company has profited from the sale of arms and weapons to countries complicit in war crimes and genocide, then it should not receive, I'll take interventions in my closing, then it should not receive public money from the Scottish Government. In 2019, the Scottish Greens secured a commitment from the Scottish Government that all Scottish public bodies would conduct human rights checks on companies, including arms companies, prior to funding them. In November 2023, the Ferret revealed that despite Scottish Enterprise having conducted 199 human rights checks, not a single firm had failed, even though some have armed states that have been widely accused of war crimes, including Israel and Saudi Arabia. Amnesty International has called the current human rights due diligence process inadequate and states that it is failing to ensure that Scotland is upholding its international obligations. Still to this day, no company has failed Scottish Enterprises human rights due diligence checks. The Scottish Government offered I'll take them during my closing. The Scottish Government offered to review Scottish Enterprises human rights checks. While this has been going on, 10,000 more people have been killed in Gaza. We need the Scottish Government to urgently report on this review and to provide Scottish Enterprise with a clear direction on the use of public funds to ensure that Scotland is meeting its international obligations. Many of these companies that supposedly need government support are reporting huge profits, with BAE reporting £3 billion of profits last year alone. It isn't clear to me at all that the mega corporations who rake in that kind of profit need our public money. BAE, Raytheon and Leonardo have all received grants from Scottish Enterprise. BAE is already the biggest arms company in Europe. Raytheon is the second biggest in the world. Every pound of public money needs to be spent carefully to ensure maximum return on that investment. We need to make sure that public money goes to building wealth in Scotland, towards tackling our biggest challenges, stopping the climate catastrophe and eliminating child poverty. We need to make sure that it isn't going into the pockets of multinational mega-corporation arms dealers. I kind of can't believe I have to be saying this. Scottish public money would be better spent on supporting small businesses, cooperative businesses, social enterprises and rural businesses. Scotland's small clean energy, nature restoration and organic food businesses would have made very good use of that money, not to mention our NHS, our trains and our ferries. Every pound of public money spent in the arms industry is a pound spent on misery, death and suffering. Scotland deserves better.
Thank you. And I now call on Willie Rennie again, up to 4 minutes. Mr Rennie.
I get slightly offended when people imply that we can't be in favour of strong defences and in favour of a moral and ethical foreign policy. Because I think we can do both. And in fact, Liberal Democrats have said we can do both. I mean, Ed Davey has made it clear that we think we should suspend arms exports to Israel. Not everybody will agree with that position. But we've made it very clear from the very beginning that we think they've gone too far. However, we are also, and Ed has made it very clear, that we're in favour of a strong defence back home. Because we are on the northwest frontier of Europe, we will be a key and continue to be a key member of NATO, and that will be important to deal with the threat of Russia, which provokes our defences almost every single day of the week. So we cannot pretend that somehow we are in a lazy backwater, that we need to have strong defences in this country, and I favour that. And this comes to the SNP position, because it is confused. I've listened for years to Angus Robertson. I listened for years when he was at Westminster, when he would talk endlessly about the defence underspend in Scotland. And he put a number on it. In 2011, he said the figure was £5.6 billion less spent in Scotland than he believed the population share should be, implying that we should be spending more in Scotland. But yet then we have an SNP position that applied for a number of years that was in favour of diversification away from defence and no munitions. Then we get a slightly different position today, which is a bit more sympathetic in tone, but fundamentally is exactly the same position, which is favouring diversification and no munitions. Yet, the SNP position is still to remain a member of NATO if it was ever to become an independent country. Utterly confusing. Utterly confusing. And if we've got any hope of getting any investment that is coming into Scotland, we need to clarify this, to bring certainty for businesses and for those who seek to invest, but also for those who are seeking to branch out on a new career or train for the first time. Because if they want to know they're going to go into the defence sector, they want to know that there's a certainty around jobs and opportunities. So we need to have clarity. Because whatever the strengths and weaknesses of the Labour government. One thing is for sure, they are going to be spending a significant increased sum of money on defence. And there are many opportunities for workers, for people, for communities, for businesses in Scotland to take advantage of that. I know particularly Rosyth Dockyard, I used to represent the area myself. They've just launched a new set of boats, which the workers are very proud about. But also in Glasgow and Port Glasgow, down in Prestwick, over in Edinburgh, up in Dundee, there are a host of jobs and communities across the country that depend on this defence spending. So if we are to take advantage of the increased investment that I believe is right to come to defend our country, then we are going to have to get it sorted with the Scottish Government to be clear exactly what the position is, because there is a danger we will throw away the opportunity of growth and opportunity in the country. And the last thing that we need is any further suppression of economic growth in Scotland. So for the sake of our economy, for the sake of workers, for the sake of our defence, can I please plead with the Deputy First Minister to get this sorted?
Thank you. We now move to the open debate. I call for Stephen Kerr to be followed by Gordon MacDonald. Up to 4 minutes, Mr Kerr.
Presiding Officer, when the SNP are up to their necks in mucking bullets, although that might not be appropriate given their attitude towards bullets, they send for Kate Forbes, because Kate Forbes has the capacity to dress up the most ludicrous policy positions with sweet reason. Yeah. And she tried today, by George, she tried today, but she failed. Because whatever way you look at the policy position of this Scottish Government on this issue, it is ridiculous. Yeah. That's the only word, ridiculous. Stuart MacDonald, former MP, SNP MP, who's done a bit of work to try and civilise the SNP's attitude towards the defence of the realm. He tweeted, or whatever it is now, on X this morning. He said, "I see there's a debate in the Scottish Parliament today on defence. Having worked hard on defence policy for my party when an MP, it pains me to see we are not evolving with the serious times we live in." He then goes on to say that he sees nothing in Murdo Fraser's motion that he couldn't support, or indeed Daniel Johnston's amendment. And then he goes on to say, we, presumably means the SNP, should be more ambitious in our support of Scotland's domestic defence sector. And then he goes on to say that the SNP, by his own words, are treating national defence industries like a dirty secret. And that is the reality of the position that Kate Forbes has been sent out today with nobody daring to sit beside her to defend. An impossible, ridiculous policy. This is ideological nonsense. It is hostility to a sector that, in the Deputy First Minister's own words, is a strategic necessity, providing secure, high-quality jobs and driving innovation in STEM, which is what Scotland needs.
Daniel Johnston.
I'm grateful to the member for giving me. I wonder if he might agree with me that actually the view that we should seek to defend our country should be a patriotic view, regardless of your view of the Constitution. Defending our people and our country should be regardless of your view of what Scotland.
I couldn't agree more with what Daniel Johnston says. This is about a patriotic duty, and it might not be fashionable in the SNP or the Scottish Greens to talk about patriotic duty, but that's exactly what this is. Now, the SNP claim to stand with Ukraine. They claim to care about national security. They love the rhetoric. And yet, their actions, which always speak louder than words, undermine the very sector that makes the munitions, that builds the ships and the systems that will help Ukraine win and help Britain and our allies to defend ourselves. Nowhere is this hypocrisy more grotesque than in the saga of the NHS equipment donation to Ukraine. The SNP government boasted about this gesture, only for it to be revealed last weekend that they had stipulated that the equipment must not be used to treat wounded Ukrainian soldiers. That defies all common decency, let alone common sense. Imagine telling a Ukrainian medic in a field hospital that they can use the equipment to treat civilians, but not the soldier lying next to them with a catastrophic injury. This is ideological dogma gone mad, and that is not neutrality. It is ideological extremism dressed up as moral superiority. It is a morally incoherent stance that insults our allies, weakens our national resilience and strengthens our enemies, betrays our duties as a member of NATO. This is absurd, morally bankrupt, strategically reckless. The SNP government must drop its policy of excluding defence projects from public support. This Parliament should send a clear message. Scotland backs our armed forces, stands with our allies and supports the industries that keep us safe and free. Anything less is a betrayal of our responsibilities at home and abroad.
Thank you. I now call Gordon MacDonald to be followed by Edward Mountain. Up to 4 minutes. Mr MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland's defence sector, covering aerospace, defence and security, is valued at £3.2 billion and supports over 33,000 direct jobs. And while I acknowledge its importance, I believe these sectors should, over time, diversify towards commercial activities, ensuring Scotland remains a hub of manufacturing and innovation. However, what I cannot accept is that parts of Scotland's defence industry are manufacturing components such as systems for the Paveway smart bombs used by the Israeli Air Force in Gaza. A 2021 investigation by the Ferret website revealed Scottish defence companies supplying components for Israel's F-16 and F-35 aircraft, rocket systems and engines for G550 surveillance aircraft, all likely to have been deployed over Gaza. Over the past decade, the UK government has licensed hundreds of millions of pounds in arms exports to Israel, including bombs, drones, grenades, small arms, tanks and missiles. Despite public pressure, the UK Labour government has suspended less than 10% of arms export licences to Israel. Therefore, I urge the UK government to halt all defence-related export licences to Israel until the killing of Palestinians stops. What is happening in Palestine reminds me of the workers at Rolls-Royce factory in East Kilbride, who from 1974 to 1978 refused to work on parts of the Chilean Air Force planes due to the atrocities committed by the Pinochet dictatorship. This boycott, a powerful act of solidarity with the people of Chile, grounded half of Chile's Air Force and is documented in the film Ne Pasarán. It's time that the trade unions across the UK took a similar stance to the workers in East Kilbride 50 years ago in order to stop the genocide being committed by Israel. Presiding Officer, defence is an important sector, but it's important to recognise the size of the defence industry compared to Scotland's economy. It accounts for just over 2% of Scotland's economy as measured by gross value added, and is 5% of the UK's £62 billion defence budget. Scotland's economy, thankfully, is diverse and resilient, with non-defence sectors driving nearly 98% of GVA. All key parts of Scotland's economy, whether it is land use, energy, construction or non-defence manufacturing, are worth more or are equal to the defence contribution. Also, like most of the UK, Scotland's economy is dependent on the service sector, with GVA for individual sectors worth more to the Scottish economy than defence, including information communications, finance and insurance, professional, scientific and technical research, tourism and hospitality, retail and wholesaling, real estate, health and education. I welcome the support the Scottish Government invests to encourage this continued diversity, and I also welcome that the Scottish Government has invested £45 million in companies involved in defence contracts since it was first elected. On skills, the motion refers to a Scottish Enterprise grant not awarded to Rolls-Royce for specialist naval welding training for submarine construction. However, it overlooks that most expenditure and work on these nuclear submarines will occur in Barrow-in-Furness in the north-west of England. It also fails to note that the Scottish Government £2 million investment in engineering skills in the Glasgow City region, developed by the Clyde Maritime Cluster in partnership with Skills Development Scotland. Finally, Presiding Officer, I question why Rolls-Royce Holdings, with a turnover of £18.9 billion and £2.5 billion in net profit, requires public funding of £2.5 million for a skills centre in order to fulfil its contracts.
Thank you. I now call Edward Mountain to be followed by Paul Sweeney. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I am delighted to stand up and speak in this debate, even if it is to highlight some of the incredible things that I hear other parties saying. First of all, I'd like to put it on the record that the MOD is a very important contributor to Scotland, investing huge amounts of money, over £2 billion a year, and our arms exports and our weapons exports are incredibly important as well. And I don't need to point out to the Chamber that Lossiemouth, which is in the region that I represent, has just benefited from an investment of over £100 million from Boeing. And I'd like to, and I'm sorry that Daniel Johnson isn't here, but to recognise what he's been saying and what the Labour Party is doing, and about the importance of investing in our armed services. For too long, I believe they've been cut down. When I was a soldier, there were 138,000 soldiers in Germany. We are down to less than 60,000 now that can be deployed in the UK. So I'm pleased to see that. And I'm pleased to see in his motion that he identifies that without the Type 26 frigate programme, there wouldn't be Ferguson Marine, or they wouldn't be able to rely on a future. Now, I've struggled with the SNP's policy about talking about diversifying from defence expenditure and defence industries, but they seem to like defence. It doesn't seem to me that you can have the two. As far as the green policies are concerned, and I'm delighted if Lorna Slater would like to articulate them to me as defined by AI, because they were completely incoherent to me. It seems that they want to and would support delivering first field dressings to Ukraine, but wouldn't give the soldiers the ability to defend themselves on the battlefield. That seems to be ludicrous. Let me be entirely clear. I believe that the first duty of every government is to secure the security of their country and their population. And that is not going to be achieved by giving hugs and kisses to those that threaten us. Let me be clear that I think there's only one place in the world that has benefited from a flower power revolution, which was in Portugal in 1974, when the soldiers put carnations in their guns to prove they weren't going to fire at the civilians. But any other country that defends itself and fights against aggression has to do with bullets. They need weapons to defend themselves, and they need the confidence of those that stand in front of them as their politicians to give them the ability to defend themselves. In very short and simple things, they need to walk softly, our armed forces, but they need to carry the stick in order to defend ourselves against the growing turbulence across the world. One only has to look at Iran, North Korea, Russia and China as centres of places where division is being sowed. Now, I would like to just look at some of the comments that we've heard about Ukraine. And I want to quote Lorna Slater to see if she's going to be able to stand up, Presiding Officer, to defend this. She said on the 5th of March 2025, support for Ukraine is wide and deep. Not since the end of the Cold War, Europe's values have been tested as they're being tested now in the face of Russian aggression. However, we are resolute. Well, we seem to be resolute, but we seem not to be resolute in providing them the ability to defend themselves. That is a complete mixed message. And then you hear of John Swinney, Presiding Officer, who stood before us and said, here in Scotland, we will forever stand with Ukraine. Well, we will stand with them, but we won't defend them and allow them to defend themselves. These are the sort of mixed messages that we get. And I've got examples for lots of people in the SNP who haven't turned up to this debate. But what we're talking about is the SNP wish to diversify rather than defend their country. well, let me say to you as a soldier or an ex-soldier that that is pure hypocrisy and not understandable.
Thank you. I now call Paul Sweeney to be followed by Paul McLennan. Mr Sweeney, up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and it's a pleasure to speak in the debate this afternoon. And I want to second the motion, the amendment, in the name of my colleague, Mr Johnson, which I think is a very sensible amendment, and I would encourage the government to support it in full, as has been indicated by the former SNP Defence spokesperson, Stuart MacDonald. I think his analysis is very cogent, that we can have an ethical policy in regards to arms export sales. Certainly, I think there's cross-party consensus in that regard, but that doesn't withstand the need for us to have serious, robust investment in our defence capabilities in this country, and that is what this debate ultimately is about. In Scotland, we contribute a great deal to the UK and NATO's defence collectively, and none more so in our shipbuilding industry, which I worked in prior to my election to Parliament. Indeed, I believe I'm the only serving political or parliamentarian in Scotland who has a background in the shipbuilding industry. I also had the opportunity to serve in Scottish Enterprise for 2 years as an account manager, working with businesses, mainly SMEs, across the aerospace, defence and marine sector in Scotland. So I have a fairly deep understanding of the potential of Scotland's defence and maritime industries, and indeed I am increasingly concerned by the hostility expressed by this government towards them. The recent example, for example, of the denial of a government support grant to Rolls-Royce to establish the Naval Welding Centre at the Scottish government-supported Scottish Manufacturing Institute in Shinnon, and to replenish the space at Rolls-Royce, which has been vacant for some years since the end of maintenance, repair and overhaul activity there, is a huge opportunity for high-value manufacturing development in Scotland. Yet the Scottish Government spurned that opportunity to crowd in investment in an area which desperately needs it. I'm really grateful that the UK Government has stepped in to offer that alternative grant funding to ensure the project will go ahead, but it really should be a reality check for the Government's position here in Scotland. We need these industries and we need to support them. In the past, the Government in Scotland has supported our shipbuilding industry. For example, the £360,000 grant towards the Applied Shipbuilding Skills Academy at Scotstoun, which is a great asset, not just for BAE Systems, but the wider shipbuilding ecosystem in the country. When I worked at BAE Systems, we regularly collaborated with Ferguson Marine. Indeed, the only thing that's keeping Ferguson Marine operational today is subcontract work on steel fabrication of units for the Tech 26 frigate programme. So it's rather ironic that the Government's amendment to today's motion is about diversification away from defence when the Government's actually engaged in precisely the opposite. It's increasing its dependence on defence work to sustain commercial shipbuilding activity on the Clyde. And of course, we could go into detail about public procurement reform with the support increased ferry production in Scotland, but that's perhaps off the topic of this debate. So I would encourage the Government to really reflect on the emerging consensus, the reality of geopolitics in Europe, the need for security, the need to defend our country, but also to recognise the immense contribution of shipbuilding in Glasgow and the wider Clydeside area, which is still the region's largest manufacturing employer. And I think some of the comments from the backbenches today, casting aspersions on this industry is absolutely disgraceful, quite frankly. They're not bomb factories. They aren't to be funded from the largesse of these companies alone. The government should be engaged and proactive and supportive of these industries, not dismissive of them. And I think the message going out to over 4,500 people who work in shipbuilding in Glasgow and the west of Scotland needs to be much more positive, much more supportive of that industry and the immense value and wealth it creates for our country. And indeed exploring those opportunities for diversification. But indeed, the government's industrial policy is so incoherent that it's actually driving away commercial shipbuilding opportunities rather than driving them in. There's immense opportunity to work in collaboration across industry. That I chair the cross-party group on shipbuilding and maritime, which several members attend, and we're looking at these opportunities. But it'd be more helpful if the government would get its defence support policy much better and much more rational instead of this reactionary nature. There's no need to conflate the sure ethical safeguards about defence export sales, but that shouldn't come at the expense of actually building up our own defence industry. We need a navy. We're an island nation.
You need to conclude.
It's fairly axiomatic.
Thank you, Mr Sweeney. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate, Paul McLennan, up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This debate is taking place at a time of heightened tensions in many parts of the world. My thoughts are with those who are suffering from the many wars and conflicts raging at the moment. Too many innocent people are being killed. As a Parliament, we have the responsibility not to further inflame conflicts with the funding of the manufacture of munitions. The Scottish Government and its agencies have a long-standing policy that public money should not support the manufacture of munitions. The Scottish Government has produced robust guidance for its executive agencies and public bodies on how they should undertake due diligence on businesses before establishing an investment relationship, and I'll touch on that in a little second. Scottish Enterprise has been clear that its human rights due diligence checks are regularly reviewed and updated in line with its most recent guidance. Now, I'm aware of the current review underway. This review must be robust and as extensive as possible. Just in this chamber last night, we discussed the horrors of the current situation in Gaza. 55,000 Palestinians killed by the barbarism of the Israeli regime. Israel has had help with weapons and munitions from the UK and the US. This has to stop. We must be unequivocal about that. The UK Government has to stop supplying arms to Israel. And in Scotland, we have to ensure that no Scottish enterprise funding finds its way to supporting companies who provide munitions to Israel. The Scottish Government, I've only got 4 minutes, the Scottish Government values the role of the defence sector in Scotland, the many jobs it supports and sustains, and the value it adds to the Scottish economy. Public money that the Scottish enterprise agencies used is focused to support companies that are wholly or partially involved in defence activities, on skills development and diversification. This ensures that Scotland continues to support and secure the jobs in the defence, aerospace and shipbuilding sectors in the work that they do. Now, I want to move on to the substance of some of the specifics of this debate. On the specifics of the motion, Scottish Enterprise considered that the specific project that had been discussing with Rolls-Royce Malin Group for working on an attack submarine was unfortunately ineligible for potential funding. Scottish Enterprise did not receive a formal application for funding from Malin. The Scottish Government provides business support via enterprise agencies to companies that operate in defence markets. Since the Scottish Government came to office, £45 million worth of support has been allocated to the enterprise agencies to defence companies or companies that are partially involved in defence activities. The Scottish Government recognises the importance of the aerospace, defence and the shipbuilding sectors for Scotland's economy and is committed to ensuring Scotland is the home of manufacturing and innovation. Scottish ministers continue to engage with industries across the country as part of this work, including through our support for defence markets, diversify into civilian markets, training support and job creation. The defence sector is not only critical to our national security, but also a strategic driver of Scotland's future workforce. As Gordon MacDonald mentioned, the Scottish Government is also investing up to £2 million to develop engineering skills in the Glasgow City region, along with the Glasgow Maritime Cluster. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, we will hear and have obviously heard that the Scottish Government does not support the defence sector. As I have outlined in my short contribution today, the Scottish Government has and will continue to defund the defence sector in Scotland. The proposal from Rolls-Royce Malin Group for work on a attack submarine was unfortunately ineligible for the potential funding. The Scottish Government has a long-standing policy in not providing funding for munitions. The decision made by Scottish Enterprise this matter demonstrated that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McLennan. We move to closing speeches. I note that Mr Rennie is not in the chamber, having participated earlier. We'll expect an apology and an explanation for that. I now call Lorna Slater up to 4 minutes. Ms Slater.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and my apologies to fellow members for not taking interventions during my opening. I will be very happy to take them during my closing. I just wanted to get those remarks on the record. In response to Edward Mountain, there is a complete coherence in my remarks. I absolutely fully support my previous remarks on Ukraine and Ukraine's fight against an oppressor and illegal war by Russia. That's not a mixed message with the question of how we use public funding. Certainly, I'll take an intervention.
Point.
Yep.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. If it's completely coherent, how is Ukraine going to defend itself against Russia if it doesn't have any weapons to do so? Is it just to hug it and kiss it?
Lorna Slater.
Mr Mountain will have heard my opening speech, which did not mention Ukraine at all, nor did it condemn arms sales to Ukraine. What it condemned was public money being used to fund companies that are selling arms to countries that are committing war crimes. Now, I know Mr Mountain is an ethical person and that he would not condone war crimes. I would not support companies profiting from creating war crimes with public money, certainly.
I have actually heard Scottish Green politicians say that the United Kingdom itself commits war crimes. Is it the Scottish Greens' position that the United Kingdom government should not be supplying weapons to itself?
Lorna Slater.
That is a sort of a bizarre proposal that Mr Carlisle puts before me. Clearly, no country should be committing war crimes. When a country needs to defend itself from an illegal invasion such as Russia is a different question than what the UK government is currently doing, which is being complicit in a genocide being committed by Israel. We need to call that out when we see it. The UK should not be supporting countries that are, through supplying weapons, munitions, intelligence, countries that are committing war crimes. That should go without saying. Certainly I'll take an intervention.
Daniel Johnson, briefly.
So given that the member says that we should be supporting Ukraine, does that include the supply of munitions to that country, and therefore should we be supporting the manufacturing of munitions on that basis?
Lorna Slater.
That was not the subject of my speech. My opening remarks were specifically about the use of public funding to fund massive corporations. And the question is whether we give public money to massive corporations who are making billions from selling to countries who are committing war crimes. That is the topic to which I restricted my remarks. And I note that BAE, Raytheon and Leonardo, all who rake in massive profits, are likely to do even more of that, whether or not I have an opinion on that, because of the instability that exists in the world. The sums that they are being given by the Scottish Government through Scottish Enterprise would be better spent in Scotland building wealth here, rather than to companies that are profiting from suffering around the world. I will take an intervention from Paul Sweeney.
I can't give you all that time back.
That's fine.
Paul Sweeney, briefly.
Thank you for taking the intervention. I just wanted to ask a particular example. £360,000 Scottish Enterprise grant to BAE Systems to create the Applied Shipbuilding Skills Academy in my region of Glasgow. That is a positive, in my view. Does the member agree?
Lorna Slater.
It isn't at all clear to me that corporations like BAE, Raytheon and Leonardo, who are raking in billions, need this money. They have their own deep pockets. Why take money away from projects that would benefit us in Scotland? That's money that isn't being spent on our NHS. That's money that isn't being spent developing wealth for our communities in Scotland. Every bit of public money comes with choices, and the Scottish Government should choose to spend the money wisely and on matters that improve things in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Slater. I now call Jackie Bailey up to 4 minutes. Ms Bailey.
Presiding Officer, 4 minutes isn't a lot of time in which to sum up this debate, so let me get straight to the point and start with the wise words of Stuart MacDonald, former MP who used to be the SNP's spokesperson on defence, already referenced by Stephen Kerr, but well worth repeating. And this is what he said. Having worked hard on defence policy for my party when an MP, it pains me to see we are not evolving with the serious times we live in. And Stuart MacDonald, who is the SNP expert on defence, is absolutely right. Because in these uncertain times, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, and now the war between Israel and Iran, the world is undoubtedly a less stable place. And it is therefore the most important task of any government to provide security for the country and its people. And Mr MacDonald had more to say. We should be more ambitious in our support of Scotland's domestic defence sector and still maintaining commitment to good human rights practice. Indeed, he said all of this in a policy paper, Think Like a State, Act Like a State. No matter John Swinney's recent rhetoric dusting down his aspiration for independence, the SNP's attitude to defence clearly demonstrates that they are incapable of the grown-up thinking and action required. Instead, defence industries are treated like a dirty little secret, and we now know they would send forces personnel into the field with pea shooters. That is what lies behind the bonkers decision on Rolls-Royce. There was almost universal astonishment that the SNP government withheld a grant of £2.5 million to Rolls-Royce for a welding centre. Why? Well, insofar as I understand their thinking, it was because the people being trained might work on the construction of a submarine which has munitions on it. The training opportunities, the good jobs that Rolls-Royce would have provided for people from West and Central Scotland should be welcomed. So too should the investment by the Malin Group establishing a marine technology park in Western Bartonshire. But apparently it is SNP government policy not to fund any jobs relating to munitions, a policy that frankly is not fit for the world as it is now, a policy based on ideology, not security, and a policy that is inconsistently applied. So can the Cabinet Secretary explain to me why Ferguson's shipyard, owned and funded by the SNP government, is able to do contract work for BAE Systems, who build warships? And just in case you didn't know, warships have munitions on them. Now, thank goodness, John Healey, Labour's Secretary of State for Defence, has said he will step in because the SNP has failed to step up. So, Presiding Officer, conscious of time and in drawing to a close, let me welcome the Strategic Defence Review, because I very much welcome the investment brought forward by a UK Labour government. Billions of pounds for improved housing for forces personnel, new submarines that will have a direct and positive impact on Her Majesty's Naval Base, Clyde, in my constituency. And I am very grateful to those at the base, both serving personnel and staff, working for partners such as Babcock's, who through their efforts contribute to the security of our country. But we need to equip them to do their job. Defence may be reserved, but growing the economy, investing in manufacturing, providing skills and training, all of these are devolved and the responsibility of the Scottish Government. But you know, the SNP have lost sight of this, because instead they want to play student politics. They are simply not serious. Time for change.
Thank you, Ms Bailey. I call the Deputy First Minister. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Let me say once again at the outset of my closing remarks about the importance that we place on Scotland's defence sector, which plays a vital role. I will actually take an intervention, early though it is.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for giving way. Does she not accept that this debate has exposed the credibility issue that the SNP now has with business? In quiet meetings, they give them warm words, be that hospitality, hotels struggling with implementation of the visitor levy, or the Scottish defence industry. And is it that the very few pro-business ministers in the government lack influence in government, or is it the reality that they're not as pro-business as they make out?
Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I think that was more speech than intervention. But what is ironic about this debate is that we have parties on either side of us making directly contradictory accusations about the Scottish Government. Both can't be true. And that's why I am happy to set out the Scottish Government's position. There's an added irony, particularly from Craig Hoy, but across the Conservatives, who frequently accuse the Scottish Government of spending too much money in areas that are undoubtedly reserved under the Scotland Act. We will remember that. We will remember this debate the next time they accuse us of doing that. The defence sector is a cornerstone of high-value manufacturing in this country, supporting over 14,000 jobs and contributing £3.3 billion annually to our economy through world-class capabilities in shipbuilding, aerospace and advanced technologies. And the one thing I would agree with colleagues across the chamber in identifying the strengths of those industries here in Scotland. And that is precisely why we have invested considerable funding to support innovation, workforce training and the wider industrial base. Another point which has been sorely missing in opposition speeches. It's why we continue to support firms as they evolve, ensuring that Scotland retains and grows its share of defence, aerospace and shipbuilding work, with all the economic and employment benefits that brings. In my engagement with the sector, the point is repeatedly made. Let me finish this point, and if I have time, I'll bring you in. In my engagement with the sector, which I'm delighted to see Craig Hoy recognise, the point is repeatedly made to me about the skills that are required in an area of growth. And that is an area where the Scottish Government undoubtedly does have responsibility. and I am actively engaged in ensuring that there is a pipeline of people and of skills. Having already promised Murdo Fraser, I wouldn't want to cut him off by taking another intervention. And so we have to invest in the pipeline of skills, and we are investing in that future pipeline, including the £185 million to support apprenticeships. Now, I will take the intervention.
Murdo Fraser.
I'm very grateful to the Deputy First Minister for giving way. I wonder if she can just clarify one point that's come up during this debate. How does the construction and maintenance of a submarine meet the definition of munitions?
Deputy First Minister.
The Scottish Enterprise reviewed the opportunity. There wasn't a formal application that was made and concluded that it wasn't consistent with the policy. In terms of the investment that we are making, those investments are helping to secure a resilient, future-ready workforce, one that will continue, I'm just about to close, one that will continue to drive economic value and support Scotland's place at the forefront of innovation and manufacturing excellence. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And I call on Jackson Carlaw to wind up.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I first of all start by congratulating Murdo Fraser on the comprehensive programme of defence industries that he identified in his speech. But I also want to congratulate Daniel Johnson, Paul Sweeney, Edward Mountain and also Jackie Bailey on what I thought were first-class direct speeches that spoke to the very heart of the issue of the defence of this country. But I also want to pay tribute to the hero of this afternoon's proceeding, Angus Robertson, who was in fact the only member of the government who was prepared to sit beside the Deputy First Minister during this afternoon's proceedings. I watched Fiona Hislop come in, note that the Deputy First Minister was sitting on her own, unsupported on the front bench, and bravely sit in the row behind her. And I'm reminded of when it used to be that the slogan of the Scottish Government was stronger for Scotland. Well, the last time they were stronger for Scotland's defences was when Derek Mackay sat in the front bench as their financial spokesman, who actively campaigned on behalf of Thales in Govan in order for them to get the ground support vehicles that were needed to be manufactured here in Scotland and no doubt to be deployed in the defence of this country. Now instead of taking the advice of someone like Stuart MacDonald, who sat with Mr Robertson at the Palace of Westminster where he spoke knowledgeably on defence matters and is now at war, clearly, with his own backbencher friends here in the Scottish Parliament, instead of taking their advice, they are now taking the advice of the Scottish Greens. And here is the nub of the issue as far as I'm concerned. How can the Scottish Government contemplate advice from the Greens, who, when we had a reception in Apprentice Week in this Parliament for over 100 16-year-olds working in a whole diverse section of the defence industries in this country, have Ross Greer on a megaphone outside this Parliament condemning them, egging those on who were pushing, shoving, spitting at them and accusing them of committing genocide. How is that supportable? And Lorna Slater, you know, let's face it, the Scottish Greens have been against British defence. They've accused Britain of committing war crimes. Ross Greer's talked about the war crimes of Churchill. They talk about the war crimes of the UK government all the way through to the present government. They talk about the need to be transparent. Well, to be transparent, you need to be free to be transparent. And in order to be free, you have to have strong defences that allow you to defend your own country. And, you know, 50 years after a politician said that one's first duty to freedom is to defend one's own and acquired the sobriquet of the Iron Lady for her trouble, Lorna Slater looks to Kate Forbes and tells her instead she should stand before our enemies and posture as the organic food lady. What possible defence of our country would that represent? We have in Scotland, well, I will, since Ms Slater was gracious enough
Lorna
to give way
Slater.
Is the member trying to suggest that Winston Churchill didn't commit war crimes?
Jackson Carlaw.
Goodness me.
I think that stands just very helpfully as an example of why the Scottish Government should think twice about any association with the Scottish Greens. We're talking here about their lack of an investment in the Rolls-Royce potential in the Clyde. I heard Marie Goujon unbelievably say, yes, we're in favour of Scotland's defence industries and its armed forces. We need to defend ourselves. But no, we're not actually in favour of giving them anything to defend themselves with. That is a completely unacceptable position. Perhaps in 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, there was the grounds for rose-tinted spectacles. They maybe were briefly seductive about the kind of world we thought we might all be going to live in. But the world is evolving, and it's evolving around about us right now. And Scotland should celebrate the fact that it has leading defence industries here in Scotland, employing the very best of our young people at the forefront of technology. Get behind them and be part of the defence both of this country and the free world.
Thank you, Mr Carlow. That concludes the debate on recognising the economic contribution of Scotland's defence sector. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of Business Motion 18003 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme, and I call on Jamie Hepburn to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. No member has asked to speak to the motion, and the question is that motion 18003 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau Motion 18004 on approval of an SSI, and I ask Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister, and I call Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding Officer, although we are going to support this SSI today, we have serious concerns with what has been put in front of us and the lack of detail that we're being asked to approve today. Concerns I raised at committee, and I will go through some of them again today. There is no detail on the level of deposit and who can alter it, the different deposit rates for different size containers, the level of producer registration fees, the lack of detail on closed-loop premises, the costs and impact for SEPA, the rural exemptions and coverage. So today we're being asked to approve a DRS scheme that excludes glass. Now, I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with the amount of taxpayer money that has been wasted to get us to this point. We could have launched a DRS scheme without glass 2 years ago. The exemption from the UK internal market scheme was granted. The system administrator would not have collapsed with debts of £86 million, a big chunk of that being Scottish taxpayers' cash lent through the Scottish National Investment Bank. All of that is lost. We would not be in a position where BIFA are taking legal action against the Scottish Government for £166 million. And if successful, this will mean less money for our NHS, less money for policing and less money for our schools. I'll give way to Lorna Slater.
Lorna Slater.
The member omits from his remarks that the UK Government granted a very limited exemption to the Internal Market Act, one of which conditions was that the deposit not be determined. Not just that plastic removed, but specifically that the deposit not be determined. It is not possible to launch a deposit return scheme without knowing what the deposit is. So the member is not being accurate in how he's representing the reasons why the Internal Market Act prevented the launch of Scotland's scheme.
I thank Lorna Slater for that intervention, but the System Administrator, Circularity Scotland, were quite clear. They were happy enough for the scheme to take place. And if that had went ahead, we wouldn't have been in the situation where we'd lost so much money and we've got such a big exposure from BIFA. So you have to ask yourself, Presiding Officer, why are the devolved government happy to have a DRS scheme without glass now, but ditch their own one at huge cost to the Scottish taxpayer back in 2023? The only logical presumption is that to not go ahead in 2023 at huge cost to taxpayers was to generate grievance. To create grievance at huge cost to the taxpayers just shows what a disgusting organisation the SNP are. When it comes to net zero, this devolved government are all talk. They are happy for diesel-fuelled lorries taking our waste to England at huge cost to our taxpayers. 18 months ago, the SNP boasted that world leaders would be calling them asking for advice on net zero. Well, Presiding Officer, the only people phoning them now are waste companies in England asking for contracts. What an incompetent government this is. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, members, and let's carry out our proceedings in an atmosphere of courtesy and respect. I call on Fiona Hislop, Cabinet Secretary, to respond.
Presiding Officer, I thank the member for the further opportunity to discuss the draft Deposit Return Scheme DRS designation order to Mr Carlaw. I would point out I have been preparing to answer this question on behalf of my colleague Ms Martin, who is on government business elsewhere in a quieter spot than the noise of the opposition from benches. This instrument will, if approved, confirm UK Deposit Management Organisation Limited, UK DMO Limited, as the scheme administrator for Scotland's DRS and set out its obligations and functions. As an industry-led scheme, the operational design and delivery of Scotland's DRS is the responsibility of a scheme administrator. This order provides the scheme administrator with the powers needed to make decisions about how the scheme should run, such as setting the level of the deposit and operating an effective return point network. It also places requirements on the scheme administrator to meet the scheme's targets, to act on behalf of industry and to protect consumers. Organisations were invited to apply to be the DRS scheme administrator in Scotland, and we received a single industry-backed application from UK DMO Limited. Following assessment of that application, Scottish ministers have put forward UK DMO Limited as the scheme administrator for Scotland, and they are named as such in this order. The same organisation has been appointed as the scheme administrator in England and Northern Ireland, ensuring that there is a consistent approach to delivery across the three nations. UK DMO Limited is a private company made up of member organisations from across industry. I am pleased that they have wasted no time in preparing for this role, and they have written to the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee to express strong support for the scheme, outline the work that they are already undertaking to prepare for its implementation, and emphasise their commitment to implementing a DRS that works for everyone, from the largest producers to the smallest shops in island communities. This order will enable an industry-led DRS in Scotland and ensure consistent delivery of DRS across Scotland, England and Northern Ireland. I once again urge this chamber to approve this instrument.
Thank you. The question on this motion will be put at decision time. The next item of business is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau Motion 18005 on approval of an SSI, and I ask Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. And I call Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I want to make clear that deposit return schemes can have a positive effect on the recycling rates for those items in the scheme, and a limited overall effect on overall recycling rates. The schemes work well across the globe, successfully, not in Scotland, although it is worthwhile pointing out that Scotland and indeed the UK now would be the first to introduce such a scheme with advanced curbside recycling. And I appreciate the Cabinet Secretary is not directly responsible for the scheme as it is now, but nevertheless we have a duty in this place to stand up for Scotland's interests, and I have several concerns. The legislation before us has a registration application date before 1st of August 2027. However, what if the scheme were to be delayed? Scheme materials are exempt from packaging extended producer responsibility, meaning those non-scheme articles are paying. This is particularly challenging if there is a delay. For local authorities, they will lose at least £1,500 per tonne on dry mixed recyclates. How will they be compensated? How will curbside collections be affected? What will be the impact on local authority recycling rates, and will there be job losses? How will small independent retailers be supported, for example accessing RVMs or incentive schemes, and I note the exemption? What will this mean for using glass as a packaging product, particularly as we have a glass recycling plant in Scotland? Will Scottish waste management SMEs be part of the scheme and access that waste? Will they be able to bid? Will waste collected in Scotland be allocated on a UK-wide basis, which means Scotland will not have an opportunity to utilise the value of that waste and, for example, set up a plastic recycling facilities? Perhaps the Cabinet Secretary could raise this with the UK Government. I have been unable to obtain a meeting.
I call on Fiona Hislop, Cabinet Secretary, to respond.
So,
apologies, Cabinet Secretary. Point of order, Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I wonder if I could seek your guidance on this matter. That from my hearing of what the Cabinet Secretary said, she told Parliament that on the DMO board of the UK organisation, there is a representation from small businesses. Now, I believe this not to be true, the reason being that the Scottish Grocers Federation, who sought to be in that board, were refused. And their contention is that there is no small business representation on this board, despite the fact that small shops, small grocery shops around the UK are the ones that don't have the space to put in reverse vending machines, that don't have the logistic capacity for dealing with this scheme in a viable manner, that all of the flaws, and I believe are around 40, in the Scottish scheme are manifest in the UK scheme. And therefore, if it's the case that the Cabinet Secretary has misinformed Parliament, what remedies do I have to correct that important error?
Yes. As an experienced member, Mr Ewing will be aware of mechanisms that exist, that it's not ordinarily a matter for the Chair, the content of members' contributions. We will continue. I call on the Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the member for the opportunity to again discuss the draft Deposit Return Scheme Amendments Regulation. DRS forms part of the Scottish Government's response to the global climate emergency, bringing both environmental and economic benefits. And I think the member does recognise the importance of that, as do 57 other countries who have a deposit return scheme. I want to point out the amendments proposed follow intervention from the former UK Government with respect to Scotland's DRS, and that was originally contrary to the wishes of this Parliament. So some of the criticisms that he's levying just now and concerns could equally be placed at the UK Government's DRS. That was the policy of his own party. It's now been introduced by the current Labour Government. But I think it's important to hear his questions about what I think the scheme should be examined and in terms of the detail of that, which will come from the establishment of the approval which is in these regulations in this order. That will be the responsibility of the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee. In relation to the point by Fergus Ewing, I refer him to the official report, and he made an accusation which I don't think is actually entirely accurate with what I said about the company. I said the UK DMO Limited is a private company made up of member organisations from across the industry. Now, I'm sure they'll be paying attention to this. He will be paying attention to this. They will be paying attention to this debate and will have heard what he said. I think it is, however, unfair to accuse me of something that I did not say. So, in relation to the concerns that people have around lack of certainty, there are too many unknowns, they are saying, therefore they can't support the amendments, I'm assuming. But that's to fundamentally to misunderstand how this scheme should work. DRS is and always has been an industry-led scheme. It is the scheme administrator that is responsible for the operational design and delivery of the scheme. That has long been the preference of both industry and his own party at UK level. It's what these regulations achieve. Once the DRS scheme administrator is formally designated, implemented. It is their responsibility to implement DRS on behalf of industry. The scheme administrator must provide the type of details the member is seeking in its operational plan by March 2026 and has written to the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee to set out how they will do so. In terms of some of those other issues in that, I think those are the issues precisely that committee will examine. But of course, the changes that are being considered today largely impact how DRS will interact with others across the UK, not the fundamental design of the scheme itself, which was subject to extensive consultation and scrutiny by this Parliament, and indeed I recall doing so as the then Deputy Convener of the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee. We've worked closely with industry on these changes, as well as DEFRA, Welsh Government and EAR. Regulations also require the scheme administrator to consult on its operational decisions. Once again, it has written to the committee to underline its commitment to do so. Changes have been implemented in 2023, and indeed I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary will be available to answer any other questions that might not be able to address at this time. So these are necessary changes to the legislative framework for DRS in Scotland, in line with the feedback we've received from industry, ensuring that the schemes in Scotland, England and Northern Ireland can launch jointly on the 1st of October 2027. I urge this chamber to approve this SSI.
Thank you. The question on this motion will be put at decision time. The next item of business is consideration of two Parliamentary Bureau motions, and I ask Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, to move motions 18006 on approval of an SSI and 18007 on designation of a lead committee.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on these motions will be put at decision time. There are 10 questions to be put as a result of today's business. Can I remind members if the amendment in the name of Shona Robertson is agreed to, the amendment in the name of Michael Mara will fall. The first question is that Amendment 17980.2 in the name of Shona Robertson, which seeks to amend motion 17980 in the name of Craig Hoy, on demanding a better deal for taxpayers in Scotland, be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we'll move to a vote, and there will be a short suspension to allow members to access digital voting.